Roy Reid.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your audience.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Roy, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Absolutely. Daniel, I have spent the last 30 years working in and around the communications industry, doing a lot of work in change management and transformation, and was inspired nearly 15 years ago to begin unpacking what trust really looks like. How does it work in our lives and what is it all about? And in the big idea that I think has come from all of that work is helping people understand that trust isn't just a feeling. It's an operating system. It's your leadership operating system or your relationship operating system, and you have so much of it that you can take responsibility for and transform your life and the lives of people around you and see better outcomes in your work and in your home.
Mr. Roy Reid, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. What pivotal moment or experience inspired you to write books centered on trust as a catalyst for transformation?
I appreciate that question so much. It's really a culmination of a number of things, but two points in my career really inspired it. Early on, I was a partner in a public relations firm, and I wanted my clients to understand that the outcome of all of our work should be increasing and improving trust with people and with the organizations that we might be working with and communicating with. As I developed the program, the ideas, and the concept around it, in 2017, I launched an evidence based training program that I co authored with my colleague, Dr. Omara Mansfield, at one of the largest healthcare systems in the country. And immediately we saw the positive impacts that it was having on people. And to date, that organization's trained 7,000 or more of their employees in this program. But it was just after that when I had a life changing event personally. I suffered what's called an acute aortic dissection. And if you've not heard that term before, and if your listeners haven't, it's not a heart attack, but it's when a portion of your heart, the aorta, begins to split open. And I had to be rushed and airlifted to a large hospital in the community. I had to have 6 hours of open heart surgery. This has about a 2% chance of survival. Um, I worked. I got through the surgery. They put me in a coma that lasted a week because of all the other things that had to go right and heal in that process. And I woke up and incredibly had all of my faculties. There didn't seem to be any long term damage and began that road to recovery. And Daniel, this is when I really learned about the transformational power of trust. This is where, at a personal level, it came home because I needed to build back my resilience. I needed to address issues that become evident in your relationships when you face your mortality and go through a crisis like this. And I had to pour into these ideas that I knew were good ideas for organizations to do, but then I lived it and went through a lot to get through that. But um, it taught me that trust is a living thing that we need to pour into, we need to feed, we need to constantly be paying attention to in doing that. And today I live a full life. I run my own company. I work with leaders around the world to bring this concept into their organizations. And I get the opportunity to see how it changes and makes people's lives so much better when they prioritize trust and work at it the way we've outlined in the book.
Trust indeed, people. And Mr. Roy, let's celebrate your second life to the
Mm, thank
world.
you. Thank you.
How does trust directly influence physical health, and what
Mm,
mechanism link into biological process like stress or immunity?
that's a great question. I had the great fortune of partnering with Dr. Mansfield, who helped me unpack and look at a lot of research out there. And one of the areas that was really evident when we talk about the attributes of trust, one of the attributes is authenticity, having a real meaningful relationship with someone. And as we break authenticity down in the book, there are six ingredients that feed into that. One of those is attitude. And when you think about your actually, attitude pours into the concept of trustworthiness as well. But when you think about attitude, a lot of times attitude may be the one thing you control on any given day. And you need to have something that frames up how your attitude is going to be every day. And the concept that we talk a lot about in the book and where Dr. Mansfield did some research as well is gratitude. And when you align your attitude with gratitude, it begins to rewire the way you think about things. And having that stress in your life or those issues in your life that you may be dealing with, um, those are heavily impacted and have residual effects on the physical side of your health and the physical side of your well-being, and the body as a whole structure. It's not siphoned off into different categories. And so when we lean into those things, when we lean into our relationships, beginning with ourselves, when we define our attitude with a sense of gratitude that says, regardless of what I'm confronted with that day, I'm going to embrace it. That it has, if it's something bad, it's happened. I'm going to have to deal with it, and I'm gonna lean into that with a very positive perspective on where it can go and where it can be done. And as I, reflect on where I had to take myself in that journey of recovery, accept the ideas that, I wasn't necessarily living in the space that I should. I can embrace making those changes. But if I do it with a sense of dread and not a sense of gratitude, I'm not going to go fully in the right direction with where I need to deal with those challenges.
Mr. Roy, if someone feels distrustful in multiple areas of life, what is the first step you recommend to begin rebuilding trust?
You know, one of the there's a set of guiding principles that we outline in the book. And the first of the guiding principles is, um, we have to build trust from the inside out. And what that means is we have to take accountability for that at a personal level. We have to hold ourselves to that higher standard. We have to ensure that we're consistent in the things that we do, so that we have both the integrity of what we're doing in the right place, that we're consistent in doing that. But then also it gives us the framework that we can hold others accountable to as well. So as we look at the attributes of trust, the first one is that we're trustworthy, that we're worthy of the trust other people have, but that also means that we have a high degree of trust in ourselves. And one of the aspects of that I mentioned a minute ago is integrity. And so how are we feeding that? How are we building that up? How are we practicing that in what we do? And if we are willing and able to confront that at a personal level, it allows us to create a strength within us that gives us that perspective in terms of how we deal with others and what that expectation can be. And then it opens the door for us to be able to reach out when we need to build a new relationship, or be honest and willing enough to confront somebody and say, uh, something's wrong. We need to deal with this. We need to be able to lean into that opportunity to improve that relationship, because then the second guiding principle is that we take responsibility for the relationship. You can't control the outcome, but if you are willing to step into it, if you're willing to be vulnerable and take that next step, it opens the door for you to be able to improve or build or repair a relationship, and trust where it may be broken.
In your framework, is self trust a prerequisite or trusting others, or do they develop interdependently?
It is essential for us to live consistently in a place where we trust ourselves. If we fall short in that, if we fail to do that, we're not going to be able to exercise and do that with others. And if we're not doing that, Daniel, we find that people know and they can see that. And so a lot of the challenge that we see in society, in our work, and in places is that idea of inconsistency. And if there's an inconsistency, it creates doubt. Doubt will feed fear, and when fear sets in, then you have a problem where people won't speak up. They won't talk about things. They won't challenge leadership when leadership might be making a mistake, and that just sets you up for all kind of bad things to happen from there at a personal and a professional level.
Mr. Roy, how can individuals maintain or restore trust during times of betrayal,
Hmm.
trauma, or systemic uncertainty?
When it when we break trust or it's broken with us, it's a very painful process, and there's a hurt that goes with that has to be dealt with and confronted, um, and there's a challenge that we have to look at where it needs to go from here. As I work with leaders and talk with people, I mentioned before, the first accountability that we have is with ourselves. That we're willing to make the change and step into a place where we may need to address issues about how we act, about what we've done, and about what we're doing first. And when we know that we're in sync with that higher expectation, when we know that we're being consistent in the things that we can do, then we have the high ground and the capacity to confront or connect with or re-engage with others where that trust may be broken or we may have broken as well. So it's creating that first layer of consistency and connectivity with the things that we do, to then be able to have that uncomfortable conversation. The second attribute, as I mentioned before, is authenticity. And one of the key ideas within an authentic relationship is candor. And candor says that we can have very uncomfortable conversations. We can argue about things, we can fight about things, because we know that we're also giving respect to each other. And when that respect is there, we can really go to work on repairing a broken relationship, um, whether it's in the work side of our lives or the personal side of our lives.
Mr. Roy, why is vulnerability often a cornerstone of building trust, and how can one embrace it without feeling exposed?
Mm, that can be such a challenging place for people because nobody likes to feel vulnerable. And yet, vulnerability is such a strength in being willing to do something that you may not be good at, look stupid at how you do it, at the risk um, of feeling awkward, but with the payoff of knowing that you can take something or people or your organization to a whole new level. And what do I mean by that? Well, my co-author has this great story about working with someone who was adversarial to them on a regular basis, and it got to the point where in almost every meeting they were at odds with each other. And if somebody wouldn't take the moment to be vulnerable and ask the question, how do we fix this, that could have gone on forever. And to her credit, Dr. Mansfield broke the ice, had the first conversation, made herself vulnerable to say, I don't want our relationship to be this way. And it opened a door for them to understand more about what made each of them do the things that they did, and come to find out they were both passionate about the very same thing. They were just coming at it from a different place. And so that vulnerability, Daniel, allowed her to ask a question that would have been very easy to dismiss and say it's not that important, and you're not. And yet it opened a whole new door that allowed both of them to get more work done in that space. And today, Dr. Mansfield's the chief medical officer at one of the top hospitals in the country, and she's there in large part, she would tell you, because of that relationship, because she took that moment to be vulnerable, to put herself a little bit at risk, to open that door and transform the nature of that relationship. So if we're not willing to take the risk of vulnerability, we often will lose out on the very nature of what trust can bring us and what we can bring to the table.
How do you address readers who view trust as a risk or weakness,
Mm.
particularly in a competitive environment?
One of the key elements that I hope people take away from the book is to understand that trust isn't an empty feeling, but it's the operating system by which they want to manage, live, and experience in life. And so when you look at the model that we've built here, it stems on a couple of primary ideas. The first is that trust is heavily influenced by two driving ideas: emotion and experience. So there's an emotional connection that certainly is made, and it's very powerful. Oftentimes, it's the first or the doorway into having a trusting relationship or a distrustful relationship. But then it's the experience over time that feeds that, and makes it what it should be, or creates the challenges in that. And then within that framework of the experience and emotion are those four qualities I talked about. Am I trustworthy? Am I worthy of the trust that I'm going to give? Am I authentic in having a real and meaningful relationship? And across the experiential line is the concept of dependability. Am I giving a consistent, reliable performance in all that I do? And then the fourth attribute we write about extensively is the idea of influence, and influence is leadership. So, all that to say, when you begin to look at trust from this idea of an operating system, just like in your phone or your computer, you know how to program it, you know how to fix or correct it when something goes wrong. You understand that it's influenced by a variety of different things and not just one overarching idea. And that if it's in these smaller parts, then it's easier to diagnose perhaps exactly where you need to address it, to improve it or build it or repair it or restore it. And so that's the takeaway from it, that take it out of the context of a feeling, good feeling or bad feeling, and look at it through the idea of it as an operating system by which you can move the needle and have an impact on the relationships in your life.
What specific trust building practices would
Mm.
you recommend for leaders aiming to foster psychological safety in teams?
Wow, that's such a big issue right now, and there's so many important reasons why we want to create that kind of environment. When we look at the attributes of authentic relationships, one of the key ones that we talk about in the book is presence. And I can't stress enough the power and the importance that leaders have with their teams to create that presence in their lives. And we can have all kinds of meetings, but if we're not present in those meetings, if we're not fully engaged with people in those meetings, and looking at it through the idea of the whole person, we're not really addressing what needs to be there. And coming out of a world that was impacted so much by the pandemic and other things that make virtual meetings the norm instead of as needed, there's a higher level of responsibility for us to build presence, to take time out of the day to connect with people for who they are and not just what they do, and give them that sense of value and purpose and meaning in the conversations that we're having. We will get so much more out of our teams and the individuals on that team if they feel like we are right there next to them, if they feel like we're walking along the path with them, and that we're not just asking them to show up to meetings where we're diving into checklists and we're looking at everything that's wrong. We've got to focus on the relationship as much as we focus on the task at hand.
Very well said, Mr. Roy.
Thank you.
Beautifully articulated. Indeed, trust, indeed. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because Abstract Essay is already in fifth season, Abstract Poetry in second season, Book
Wow.
101 Review in fifth season, two Comedy 101 in second season, Food 101 in fifth season as well, Geography 101 and Love Letters in third season, and my baby podcast, Mental Health 101, Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, Science 101 and Sex 101 in each first season. Please do listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Roy, as an author, what will be your short-term and long-term goals?
Well, right now my short-term goal is to bring this information to as many people in a couple of different venues. I'm currently working on some products and opportunities for people to engage in the content online, and so I hope to see some of that launched over the next few months. Long term, I want to create a legacy that says I lived a full life and a life that contributed to the lives of others by helping them understand the transformational power of trust.
Mr. Roy Reid, thank you for your second life. You're empowering people of the world. So please do create more books that empower us. So can you please invite our listeners to support the trust transformation?
Absolutely. They can find more information at thetrusttransformation.com.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Roy Reid because if you support him, more and more and more empowering books like this to come. Mr. Roy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
More to come, people. See you soon.